Heaven on earth, liturgical wisdom from Eastern Christianity. Because apparently Western Christianity has no more liturgical wisdom, which is actually absolutely true. Since the liturgical enlightenment, the liturgical renewal, the liturgical innovation, novelty, fabrication after Vatican II, the destruction of the real Roman Rite, the destruction of the liturgical wisdom of the Western Church. There is no more liturgical wisdom in the Western Church, but can only be found in the East. Let's start with this interesting article, and it's true it is sad as well because it tells you that in the West we have lost liturgical wisdom. We have lost ancient heritage. We have lost the heritage of the fathers, the faith of the fathers, the liturgy of the fathers, the spirituality of the fathers, of the apostles. And the only way to bring it back is to bring back the real Roman Rite, the real various uses of the Roman Rite, like the Dominican, the Ambrosian, the Milanese, the Sarum, the Masoretic, um, the Rite of Braga, and so forth. It's not a novelty and innovation, not using the words of Pope Benedict XVI when he was the prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, where he called the liturgical novelties which emanated after the Vatican II in the name of the Council, that this liturgy was gave us stones rather than bread, and that this liturgy uh, was a fabrication and on the spot, banal on the spot product, like any manufacturing process. That is what he said, and because it is true, and it is quite frankly. You can see the fruits of the liturgical deform in the West. But let's go over this article here. Heaven on Earth, Liturgical Wisdom from Eastern Christianity. I will read most of it and do some minor comments here and there. So this was, I guess, published in July 1st, 2022, but the matter of the content is timeless. So it doesn't matter if it was printed 50 years ago or 100 years in the future. It doesn't matter. The Eastern liturgies stand as an ancient witness against the West, which has abandoned its own liturgy, to the church's rich uh, heritage, instructing us in their various and rich ways of the paths to God. The liturgy is a path to God. And here you can see the bishop standing before holding the sacred blood, the blood of the lamb slain from eternity. Um, and he is in front of the iconostasis, which is kind of like in the West, we would have had the root screen in the Western church. You still see some old buildings, old churches, some rood screens, which is the equivalent of the iconostasis, which is the veil, because the church is based upon the Temple of Jerusalem, and it is the veil into the Holy of Holies, because back here, ladies and gentlemen, is the Holy of Holies. This is where the liturgy is. This is the Holy of Holies, inside back here, behind the veil, behind the wall. That's why, like the Old Testament, the high priest would enter into the Holy of Holies, like Christ entered into the Holy of Holies through the veil of heaven. This is entering heaven. And in the Roman Rite, where the priest ascends the steps of the altar, he prays that he may be worthy to enter into the Holy of Holies. That is why even, hey, traditionalist orders, restore the root screens, restore them, even restore the veils of the cloth veils, the curtains, like the Armenian Orthodox or the Coptic Orthodox or the Ethiopic Orthodox. Anyways, so this is the image here. He brings out the bread of heaven from the holy of holies, from heaven, the bread which came down from heaven. This is the image of the bread coming down from heaven. John 6. Read it and see what Jesus Christ himself says. Bishop Benedict of the Ukrainian Catholic Eparchy of St. Nicholas, at a hierarchical divine liturgy of St. John Chrysostom. In the West, it would be a pontifical solemn high mass uh, of St. Gregory the Great, if you want to put it that way. But even though the Western liturgy is older than St. Gregory the Great. Um, so let's continue. It is easy to forget that the Catholic Church is composed of 24 self-governing churches. So yeah, there are the sui juris. So each one is self-governing. Like the Melkites, I'm technically a Melkite Catholic. So we have um, our own patriarch, but still the patriarch is in communion with the patriarch of the West, a title which Benedict XVI, again being an innovator in a sense, removed from the titles of the Pope, retaining only the supreme pontiff and the bishop of Rome and successor of Peter and so forth, removing the historical title of patriarch of the West for the bishop of Rome. So Benedict, and this actually facilitated communion among the churches. So, uh, yeah, for example, so basically, our patriarch is governing his church, like the patriarch. There's, I don't think the Ukrainians have their patriarch, or technically, is it a patriarch or not a patriarch? I'm not sure. But again, they have a self-governing church, but still under Rome, of course. And so it says 24 self-governing churches with distinct liturgical rites. Uh, but of course, how can Francis allow distinct liturgical rites when they contradict the one Roman rite, the novelty of Vatican II, of after Vatican II, his novelty, his liturgical innovation, not his, but Paul VI, the destroyer of the Roman rite? How can they coexist with with that one rite which was invented after Vatican II, which imbues the spirit of the council? How can these ancient rites coexist with the novelty of the liturgical innovation of the new rite, as Paul VI called his very own creation? It can't. They can't. That's why Francis is trying his best to destroy the ancient Roman rite and forbidding it. Why? Not because uh, because it contradicts. It is stands in stark contrast to the novelty, the Protestantized liturgy emanating after the Second Vatican Council in the Western Church, destroying the liturgy of the West, destroying the faith of the people, destroying the innocence of children. Um, but yeah, but they have their own distinct liturgical rites. But unfortunately, a lot of the Eastern churches, which is a warning to the Eastern Orthodox and Oriental Orthodox, what they see is a lot of the uh, Eastern churches, which are in communion with the Bishop of Rome, are succumbing many to the various degrees to the liturgical novelties of the Roman Church, and um, that does not bode well. And actually, that's one of the main reasons I have reduced the stop almost going to the local Malachite parish in where I live, because they have introduced and have been introduced uh, altar girls, girls being fooled into believing that they one day could become priests or clergy in any way, shape, or form, and destroying the clear liturgical, clerical order of the liturgy. Because we have altar boys and men serving at the altar. These are kind of like what do you call accommodations. if there is enough people, like there are seven orders traditionally in the church: lectors, acolytes, exorcists, porters, so forth. And all these functions in the liturgy should be performed by clerics. So when there is not enough clerics, to men, clerics, clergy who can perform these functions, ordained acolytes, ordained subdeacons, ordained deacons, then as an accommodation, as a concession, men or boys can serve. Girls or women have no place in there because it is a clerical function, and it's not exclusive. Well, it is exclusive because Christ himself chose it that way, and the Jewish religion was the only religion, the true religion of God was the only religion which in the ancient world which only had male clergy, as far as I know. Every other pagan, basically demonic religion of the past had female priestesses and male priests. Female, uh, it's basically so they had their women clergy as well. But Christ did not succumb to the temptation. He elevated women in every sense of the word, including his mother, giving her to Saint John, that she becomes our mother. He took her to heaven, body and soul, yet he did not have her at the Last Supper or ordain her as a priestess of his new and eternal covenant. Okay, let's go again. We lose sight of this because the Latin Church, which see, this is a lie. The Latin Church, which worships according to the Roman Rite, not anymore, not since 1969. We do not worship according to the Roman Rite. We worship according to, using the words of Knights of Malta, in their kowtowing to Francis, the rite of Paul the Sixth, not the Roman Rite, the rite of Paul the Sixth, the liturgical, using the words of Paul the Sixth, the liturgical innovation of the new rite. It is not the Roman Rite. That's why go find a real Roman Rite, meaning the so-called Latin Mass. The war in Ukraine has put the spotlight on one of these 24 churches. The Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church has 5.5 million adherents, led by one of the most outspoken voices against the Russian invasion, Major Archbishop. He's not technically a patriarch, Major Archbishop, whatever his name is. Um, Along with 13 of the 23 Eastern Catholic churches, the Ukrainians worship according to the Byzantine Rite. Again, there are slight different variations in the uses of the Byzantine Rite. There's the Melkite, there's the Russian. Um, and I mean, even the Russians, they had the schism of the old believers because the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church decided to do some rubrical changes to the liturgy, and the old believers said, why are we innovating in our liturgical heritage we received in Russia from the fathers, imitating the Greek usage? And they did a split in the Russian Orthodox Church, which lasts almost to this day. I think there's some kind of a get together again between the old believers and the Russian Orthodox um, new believers. um, which celebrates the liturgy of the lost great city of Constantinople. There is a famous account in listen to these words, Russian primary chronicle. The Russian primary chronicle describing how the Ukrainians first came to embrace the faith and worship of the Byzantine Empire. So the Russian primary chronicle talks about how the Ukrainians. Okay, there is no such thing as Ukrainians. Okay, let's go. Let's go. Let's go rogue here. The Russian primary chronicle is called the Rus primary chronicle. The Russian primary chronicle. And it's called The Tale of Bygone Years from the Old Slavic, which was the language used between the 10th and 15th centuries by East Slavs in Kievan Rus. Russians spread from Kiev into the east. And uh, so Kievan Rus and its successor states from which the Belarusian, Russian, and Ukrainian languages later evolved. So we're talking here about one large Slavic family. So those Ukrainians are Rus, Russian. And this book, this chronicle, this Russian chronicle, so so the opening sentence of the text, which reads, "These are the narratives of bygone years regarding the origin of the land of Rus." The land of Rus. In Arabic, Rus means Russian. The Rus, the Russians, Old Slavic. The first princes of Kiev. Uh, and from what source the land of Rus had its beginning. So the land of Rus, the land of Russia, had its beginning from the Kievan Rus. So this is the Russian Chronicles. And just to finish up here and then go back to the liturgy and the, but just kind of since we're living in these days of insanity, when did actually Ukraine actually exist as an independent state? 1991. So the collapse of the Soviet Union. So under the Tsars, it was part of Russia. Soviet Union under Russia. Before that, it's one big hunk of land. The collapse of the Soviet Union. Uh, so in 1991, Ukraine became an independent state. How did that happen? Formalized with a referendum in 1991. So they can have a referendum and declare themselves independent. And of course, the West would recognize that. But of course, um, they would not recognize other people doing the same thing. And what happened in the West in November 2013? President Yanukovych did not sign the Ukrainian European Association Agreement and instead pursued closer ties with Russia. The democratically elected president of the Ukraine decided, you know what, I like to actually have better relations with my Slav, Russian blood brothers more than the rest of the Western Europeans. And of course, this European association was, between the EU, the European Economic Energy Community, Ukraine, and it establishes oops, a political and economic association. And that is the reason, boys and girls, that the West, the US, the EU instigated and helped in a coup against the democratically elected president of the Ukraine. If the Ukrainians didn't like it, they could have voted him out next year, the next election, and got a different president. But no, no, we get the democracy we like. If the democratically elected president does something we don't like, now we can overthrow him, create coups, and so forth. So they overthrew the elected president of Ukraine in 2014 because why? He decided to go with Russia instead of the EU and the US. That is a sin, an unforgivable sin. But of course, we can talk about democracy and spreading democracy. Oh yeah, okay. Um, of course, when that happened in 2014, the annexation of Crimea. How did that happen by the Russian Federation? Didn't happen just because Russia marched in and took over and invaded Crimea. No, that was an official result of a referendum in Crimea for reunification with Russia, which, with a large majority, voted to join Russia. And you ask why? Because most of these people are Russians. Most of them speak Russian, and they have, and most of the Ukrainians were already bilingual with Russians, and they are stuck with next to Russia. Yeah, they wanted to be part of Russia. And so Russia said, well, how come this referendum is not okay, but the Ukrainian referendum is okay? Huh? So they joined Russia. And well, the West instigated the coup 2014. So, anyways, so and then what happened? And still in 2014, because this is happening these days. In April 2014, Ukrainian separatists, uh, separatists, well, wasn't the Ukraine, again, a separatist group to separate from the Soviet Union, from Tsarist Russia? Uh, Self proclaimed the Donetsk People's Republic and the Lugansk People's Republic. So that's not new. This is from 2014, and held referendums by themselves. There were no Russians in there. On 11 May 2014, the separatists claimed nearly 90% voted in favor of independence. So 90% voted, we want to be independent from this new Ukraine. So how come their vote is meaningless? And of course, then a civil war started, and the Western Ukrainians started like bombing the Eastern Ukrainians. They, their brother Slavs, their brother Rus, their brother Russians. And of course, now they're going to have a referendum. And the West is saying this is illegal. This is a fake referendum. Well, if you base it upon the 2014 results, yeah, that's exactly what they want. They want to go, they be independent, and now they're going to be, you know what, independent. We're Russian. Let's just join the Russian Federation and get it over with. That's what's going to happen. So, why don't you respect democracy? The rule of the people who voted for their, desired independence. All right, let's go back to our little thing. So the Russian Chronicles is about the Kievan Rus, the origin of the lands of the Russians, the lands of the Rus, which included Belarusia, Russia, and so forth. And so in this book, explaining how they embraced the Christian faith and adopted the Byzantine Rite, or the Byzantine, yeah, Rite, or ritual liturgy. So, so it explains it in this book. So, according to the legend, Vladimir the Great sent out emissaries to Latin Christians, Jews, and Muslims, as well to Constantinople to investigate their faith. When the emissaries returned from the latter, Constantinople, they recounted the experience in the great church of Hagia Sophia, which has been turned into a mosque by the invading hordes of Muhammad. And now it's turned into a mosque again by Erdogan. Um, you know, that's how the religion of peace spreads. So what did these people say? The emissaries from the Kievan Russians, the Kievan Rus. We went to Greece, and the Greeks led us to an edifice. And I want you to hear how they say it, to emphasize it, how important is the liturgy, how important is beauty, how important is chant, how important is awe and awesomeness in converting people and in offering worship to God. We went to Greece, and the Greeks led us to the edifice where they worship their God. That's before the Kievan Rus adopted their God, the true God, the Trinity. And we knew not whether we were in heaven or on earth. That is the point of the liturgy. It's not, peace be with you and with your spirit. Okay, today's announcements are, that's not heaven on earth. That's a mall announcement, over the loudspeakers. For on earth, there is no such splendor and beauty, and we were at a loss as to how to describe it. We only know that that God dwells there among men. So just this beauty, this chant, this awesomeness of the liturgy made these pagans say, there God dwells among men. Um, so, so we don't know exactly when they went to the West, what liturgy did they experience? Did they just go to some little church, or did they go to some cathedral with a full, awesome um, liturgies? We don't know. But in any case, but that is the whole point of the liturgy, where even pagans say, okay, this is where God dwells with men. And their service is fairer than the ceremonies of other nations. For we cannot forget that, for we cannot forget that beauty. Beauty is very important in liturgy. I mean, why do kids don't go to mass anymore? They find it boring. They walk out. They reach a certain age, 17, 16. Okay, they can't force me to go to church anymore. I don't want to. I don't want to go. I want to watch like football or something. Go out with my friends. I gotta go. I gotta mow the lawn today. I gotta wash my clothes. I can't go to church today because they don't feel the obligation. They don't see the necessity. They don't experience the beauty, the awe, the awesomeness, the mystery, and the sacredness of this edifice and the event, the ceremonies and rites which happen inside this building, because of the liturgical deform in the West has stripped the church of that beauty in the West. Every man after tasting, this is very important, every man after tasting something sweet is afterwards unwilling to accept that which is bitter. And therefore, we cannot dwell longer here. So, when somebody eats something sweet, so imagine if you eat some, I don't know, some honey, and then take something even which might not be bitter, might be just, slightly sweet, you will find it bitter by comparison to the honey. Other than, of course, trying something bitter, then the contrast will be huge. But even something which is not bitter by itself, in exclusion, without comparing it to the sweet, but when you start comparing it to the sweet, it becomes bitter. And that's, I will say, from my own personal experience. I've, for years now, been attending either if I'm around a well celebrated ancient liturgy, an Eastern Rite, I will go there. But for the most part, from where I live, what I can go to is the traditional Roman Rite, the real Latin Mass, the real Roman Rite. Um, but I do not exclude going to the Novus Ordo, the fabricated liturgy of Paul VI, when there is no other opportunity to go to the real Roman Rite or to a Byzantine liturgy. So every time I would go to the fake Roman Rite, the so-called Liturgy of Vatican II, even though it was not celebrated at Vatican II, they celebrated the real Roman Rite at the council. But anyways, let's pretend the liturgical renewed liturgy. Uh, I am actually quite bored, and I don't feel that awesomeness. I don't feel that mystery. That it is hard to put into words. It is hard to put into words. Um, and I just sit there going through even in a not a clown show, no, even a well celebrated, dignified liturgy of the fake Roman Rite, I still find it boring because I have tasted the sweet. And when you taste the sweet, something which is much less sweet tastes bitter. And I've said this comment in a different video. It is like when you start eating pasture raised free range eggs. Nice, orange, dark, tasty, full of nutrition and taste. You were always eating the regular stuff, the pale white stuff. And then after you eat the free range pasture raised eggs, and say, oh man, we ran out of eggs. Okay, oh whatever, I'll eat this regular egg stuff. You eat it. What is this pale, tasteless egg? This fabricated egg in the mass production of eggs. It is tasteless. You do not want to eat it. It doesn't mean it doesn't give you nutrition. It gives you some nutrition. But by comparison with the real deal, it is poor nutrition. Same thing with the liturgy. Same thing as they say here. You taste something sweet, you can't take the bitter anymore. So after working with the Byzantine Rite, they could no longer could do nothing else to but to return to this transcendent and awesome experience. So the author here, he's a professor or something. PhD, serves as associate professor. I'll put the link to the article. Anyways, so he himself says. I mean, he himself says here. As a 15-year-old altar boy, I had a similar experience. I was invited to serve at the vigil of the Theophany, which is uh, Theophany, the Epiphany in the West, it would be called, at the local Ruthenian Catholic parish, which is kind of like a Russian Catholic parish, which also celebrates the Byzantine Rite, standing beside the altar, surrounded by candles, clouds of ascending incense, the, the smells, the bells of the censer sounding unceasing chants echoing. I knew not whether I was in heaven or on earth. So it affects the soul. A 15-year-old was like transported out of this world. Years ago, when my niece and nephew were quite young, maybe 5 years old and whatever, they were quite young. I took them to the traditional Roman Rite, um, and they sat there mesmerized. The boy, I don't know how he was 3, 4, I can't remember. He was quite young. He just sat there, just looking. The altar boy is going here and there and everywhere, the incense, the chant. And the girl, my niece, was saying, oh, when we were walking to this, oh, this sounds like, Frozen, all the chant, the music. And they just sat there for an hour and a half, or maybe even more. But I watched them go to the regular mass. They're fidgeting, they're playing on stuff. They can't sit still. Why? Because it's boring. It's not like the real deal. There is no mystery. There is no sacred event. There is no transporting out of this mundane world into heaven. You want the liturgy to be heaven on earth. You don't want to bring heaven, you don't want to make the heavenly liturgy an earthly liturgy. But that's exactly what they did with the simplifications, with the deformation of the liturgy of the Roman Rite. So the Latin Church does not celebrate the Roman Rite. It celebrates a fake Roman Rite, a fabricated liturgy of the 1960s. So the author says, I could not return home either. In that, I could no longer think of liturgy in the same way. So his mind, a 15-year-old, his way of thinking about the liturgy changed from this one experience. I saw it now for what it is. What is the liturgy? It's a mystical encounter with the living God enacted before us through beautiful and transcendent symbols of sacramental ritual. Liturgy is not about us. Its etymology is not the work of people, as many of us have been told, from but from its ancient meaning, it signifies the work on behalf of the people. is the function of the priest. He works on behalf of the people. The liturgy is the work for the people, on behalf of the people, not of the people. Because it is the work enacted by Christ, acting through the ministry of the priest and drawing worshippers into the wedding feast of the Lamb in heaven. Wedding feast of the Lamb in heaven, not the upper room Last Supper. Okay? The Eastern liturgies. Again, I have to remind the professor all apostolic liturgies. He's saying Eastern liturgies because the West has thrown its liturgical heritage in the garbage and replaced it with a fabrication. So I'll say the Eastern liturgies and the traditional, the real Roman Rite, the real Ambrosian Rite, the real Masoretic Rite, the real Carthusian Rite, the real Dominican Rite, not the novelties, not the innovations, not the reforms, stand as ancient witnesses to the church's rich heritage, which in addition to the Byzantine Rite, including the Syriac, the Armenian and Alexandrian family, stretched primarily across Eastern Europe, the Middle East, India, and East Africa. And actually, you know what? In India, what's happening? I'm going to do another video on it. Again, at the instigation of the Vatican, promoting novelty. There has been a split among the Malankara, I believe, church upon those traditionalists wanting to hold on to their liturgy as it is, and the innovators following the novelties, the heretical novelties, because every novelty in the liturgy, novelty is condemned. It is not, the liturgy is handed down. We do not innovate. It grows over the centuries, but we don't set up a commission to revise the liturgy and make up stuff as they did, in the 1960s. Um, they have a conflict between the innovators, supported by Francis and the Vatican, and the traditionalists who want to hold on to their heritage, to their liturgy, which they received from St. Thomas, the apostle. I'm going to do a complete video on that one some other day. Some want to continue their facing east, some want to turn around, some want to stay at the altar as they always do, some want to go sit on the side like they do in the fake Roman Rite. Instead of promoting the ancient heritage, like as Vatican II and its decree on the Eastern churches tells them, restore your traditions, hold on to your traditions, don't abandon them. But that's against the the uh, the innovators in control these days. Um, they each instruct us in their various ways and rich ways of the paths to God. That's why, yeah, the liturgy passes the faith too. It's not just. I had the experience of attending a Coptic Orthodox liturgy. Of course, I did not receive communion because we are not, unfortunately, in communion with each other. But it is rich in doctrine about the real presence, the sacrificial nature of the Mass, the distinction of Christ, humanity and divinity, and so forth. Full of um, doctrine and quite long. It's beautiful because time flies. Like when I attend the ancient Roman Rite, could be an hour 45 liturgy, not even not just a Sunday, because the priest will preach for 20 minutes and then there's chant and communion and whatever. Could be an hour and a half, hour 40 minutes, depending. Flies. You don't even feel it. When I go to the liturgy of the rite of Paul VI, it's like, oh my God, it's like 45 minutes. Finally, it's 50 minutes. Okay, we're done. Oh, finally. You're waiting for the mass to finish because it does not take you out of this world into the heavenly liturgy. It does not transport you out of this mundane world into heaven, which is the whole point of the liturgy. Um, okay, of course, we're not talking about the desecration of the Eucharist through communion in the hand and the billion, Eucharistic ministers giving everybody communion. We're not even talking about that. We're just talking even about the strict Mass itself. Anyways, their unique witness and the patterns they share have been identified by Stephanus. Well, these two authors wrote this book, Introduction to the Eastern Liturgies, which I'm not going to go. You can go link it. But in their book, they explain how these authors, the liturgy is the soul of the Christian East and the Christian West. See, they why do they want to pretend that the West has no culture? The West has no liturgy. The West has no heritage. The West has no tradition. It is the same East and West. The West, through the innovators and the destroyers, has tore asunder its heritage, its liturgy, its spirituality. But it still exists in a remnant of those trying to restore the faith once for all delivered to the faith, wanting to restore the liturgy of their fathers. But many bishops, unfortunately, and even very high ranking people in the church hate it. Why? Because the ancient rite, the ancient liturgy, the ancient discipline, the ancient spirituality teaches a different, non ecumenical, exclusive, robust faith. They don't like that. They prefer a different kind of faith. Match a new faith to match a new liturgy. Anyways, these authors say the liturgy is the soul of the Christians, of the Christian East and West, of all Christians. Liturgy is not just the texts and rites and rituals, it is encountering the, the mystery of God. And now, I had here a definition of the liturgy, but I'm not going to bother. But basically, what the professor here said applies. So, anyways, um, uh, but it is the encountering of the mystery of God, the now and not yet of the Christian experience. It is the visible expression of the faith of a community, the the imitation of the Christian message in a particular time, place, and culture and people. The history of liturgy is a story of people at prayer. And that's why the saying is lex orandi, lex credendi. The way you pray is the way you believe. The law of prayer is the law of faith. You change the way you believe, you will change your faith. You want to change the faith, you change how people pray, and you will change their faith imperceptibly. It is a visible expression of the faith of the community. The incarnation of the Christian message in the so the liturgy is the incarnation, making fleshly of the Christian message, makes it present in the world in a particular time, place, culture, and people. The history of the liturgy is a story of people at prayer, and the different rites express particular cultural incarnations of the people at prayer. But actually, this is kind of true, kind of not true, because you will see a consistency of the rites throughout all the ancient liturgies, from Ethiopia to Egypt to India to Armenia to Constantinople to Rome to the other Western provinces. They have the same. It's not just the culture. Actually, the liturgy changed the culture. They all have the priest facing east. They all had sacred languages to pray to God. They had the veils or the walls or the separations entering to the Holy of Holies. All of them had male priesthood. All of them have male clergy. They have different ranks of clergy. They have all chant. They all use incense. They all use candles. It goes on and on and on and on and on and on. Because if it was the culture, then the culture would form the liturgy. But you'll notice that the liturgy actually formed the culture. Of course, they have different slight expressions. Like the Ethiopians will actually wear They are, I think, the closest to the Aaronic priesthood because they will wear the white turbans and the white. So it's kind of very, but again, they have the because actually the vestments of the priest, east and west, are based upon the vestments of the high priest in the temple. It's not the clothing of regular people in Rome in the first century, second century. No, it's actually based upon the vestments of the priest. The history of the Okay, I pray. For the liturgy is their for the liturgy is their center as it expresses their faith. The liturgy is their center as it expresses their faith. So, if the liturgy doesn't express your faith, or if you participate in the liturgy, you believe as your liturgy tells you to believe. But if it is a watered down liturgy, a Catholic light, a Christian light, you will have a Christian light faith, a fake Christian faith. Eventually, you might lose that faith. It will become lukewarm, become, whatever, Christian, not Christian, Catholic, not Catholic, who cares? So, the liturgy express for the liturgy is their center as it expresses their faith, their life, their spirituality, their piety, their heritage, and their experience of God. That's how important the liturgy is. That's why I harp upon the liturgy so much in a lot of my videos. But I get tired of saying the same thing over and over again because sometimes it just doesn't penetrate, even among my own family. It doesn't go through their heads. But you know what? You can't change people. If they wanna, maybe when they see, hopefully it never happens, if they start seeing their kids drifting away from the faith, I hope that never happens. That is the most scary thing because a fake liturgy, a watered down rite, will transmit a watered down faith. And a watered down faith is like a house built on sand. A little wind, a little attack of people who do not believe, innovators, heretics, schismatics, pagans, atheists, and that house will tumble. You need a strong faith to withstand the storm which we are living in. So he says many of these peoples live in Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Ukrainians, Byzantine Catholics. Um, that's not important. And he says urges you to support them through this website. Um, just as the liturgy is bound outside primary. So the liturgy has our just as liturgy is bound up with culture. Not really, as I said, the liturgy formed culture because the word culture, cultus, comes from worship. So how people worship changed how people lived. When they went and evangelized the Druids and the Celts and the Slavs and like here the story of the Ukrainians, of the Russians, the Kievan Rus who went to Constantinople. Constantinople. They did not the culture, the liturgy. They took it as it is because it comes from St. John Chrysostom from the fathers, and they embraced it whole in whole. And it's not like, okay, let's change it around because our culture, we do these differently, so we're going to alter the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom to fit our culture. No, it is the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom which formed the Kievan Rus' culture. So yeah, it's tied to culture, but it is the liturgy which forms the culture, not the culture which changes the liturgy. um, so our own liturgy, meaning has become the Western liturgy, the fake Roman rite, the rite of Paul VI. The liturgy of Vatican II uh, has become an expression of a culture that has lost sight of the primary primacy and the mystery of God. So we have a liturgy which have lost sight based upon a culture which has lost sight of the primacy and mystery of God. That's why we have a banal on the spot product, as Cardinal Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, called the liturgical novelty, which we are suffering through. Eastern Christians can help us rediscover our own heritage so that we too can see the liturgy for what it is. But yeah, it is let me finish up, an expression of heaven on earth. The liturgy is an expression of heaven on earth. But how are they going to make us help to rediscover our own heritage, meaning to rediscover what was lost, what was thrown, which is the real Roman rite, the ancient Roman liturgy, not just the Roman, all the Western rites, as I said before, Ambrosian, Masoretic, um, resurrect the ancient Sarum rites, the rite of Braga, the religious order rites, Carmelite, the traditional Carmelite rite, the traditional Ambrosian rite, the traditional Dominican rite, um, the traditional Carthusian rite, and so forth. These are all that's our heritage, so that we too can see the liturgy. Yeah, the real liturgy, because there's no way you can see your heritage or heaven on earth in the fabricated liturgy of Paul VI. So the only solution to our dilemma here, boys and girls, is to return to the true liturgy, to the true faith, which it embraces and explains and passes on. So this was the article by Dr. R. Yared Saud. I don't know how you pronounce his name. He serves as the Associate Superintendent for Mission and Formation for the Archdiocese of Denver. Associate Professor at in Augustine Institute for Augustine Institute. Anyways, so this is the liturgy. So this is the article, Heaven on Earth, Liturgical Wisdom from Christianity. Therefore, we have to restore our liturgical wisdom of Western Christianity. Can only be done by a restoration of the ancient liturgy, of liturgies and rites of the West, and preserve the liturgies and rites of the East undefiled by novelty. Okay, that's it. That's all. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, please subscribe, and share the video, and I will try my best to do many more videos on a much more regular basis. So hopefully we can grow this channel and spread the faith, keep the faith, and remain in God's one and only true church, which is the Catholic Church. And hopefully all our truly separated brethren of the churches of the East, Oriental Orthodox and Eastern Orthodox, who have real priests, real bishops, valid orders, we will be united in the one body of Christ, which is governed by the successor of Peter. All right, that's it. That's all. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.